I'm not sure if y'all have noticed, but the 90s are so back. Hi, welcome back to another episode of The Spin Cycle. I'm Kiara McKinney, your host. And today we have so much to talk about. Pop music history continues to be made. Last week, Taylor Swift teased her most sensual era yet with the visuals for her The Life of the Showgirl album, just featuring sequins and feathers and leg-bearing glamour. A look that's more burlesque than cottagecore. In her most overtly sexual aesthetic we've seen from her, it signifies a larger cultural wave because whether or not you've noticed, as I said, the 90s and early 2000s are back. From low-rise jeans, tabloid body talk, and the return of heroin chic, we can at least relish in a new wave of music that feels both a little bit like rebellion and a little bit like deja vu. So let's take a little time machine trip back to the 90s and early 2000s when Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Madonna, and Jessica Simpson were, for lack of a better term, pissing off the conservatives of that era. There was a lot of like juxtaposition and playing with innocence and overt sexuality to like provoke and challenge these conservative norms. Britney Spears is, of course, like the poster child for this, of her being both like portrayed as like America's sweetheart, but then like as we saw her kind of slowly evolve into her own person and a more sexual being, of course, there was pushback in the media by political pundits and probably your dad or something, et cetera, et cetera. And then we can't talk about this subject without discussing Christina's stripped and dirty era, raunchcore at its peak, sparking outrage, but also carving a space for women to own their own narratives. And here's the irony of all this, right? Is that pop was constantly, and it still is, dismissed as being for the masses. Bubblegum music without depth. People say it's a formula. It's a sellout move compared to like the grittiness of rock or the authenticity and hustle of rap. But in hindsight, really, these women, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Madonna, Janet Jackson, they were performing a kind of counterculture that just like didn't look like the political speeches that some indie rock stars, the lectures that they'd give to their audience impromptu. Instead, they really used the mainstream stage, network TV, TRL, Pepsi commercials to kind of weave in this protest throughout their performance. It wasn't underground, but still very subversive. And because it was everywhere, it shaped my generation. It taught millennial women that we didn't have to be just one thing. We didn't have to be just the bubblegum pop girl or just the outcast rebel, that there were layers and multitudes to us, that we could grow and evolve, and we could own our sexuality on our own terms. Now, going back to my episode about pop mothers and daughters, of course, we have the descendants of these trailblazers now. We have Sabrina Carpenter, who is always slyly mocking the male gaze. Sabrina's recently teased album, Man's Best Friend, its cover art started a lot of hoopla online because people were really failing to see that she is being cheeky, that everything that she does is tongue-in-cheek, and she's really just like mocking the male gaze. She's not playing into it. She's exposing it. We also have Chappell Roan, who's really revolutionary in how she centers sapphic desire and theatrical eroticism. And, you know, she's not necessarily like the most politically outspoken pop star that we have. In fact, Sabrina is way more vocal about her political views than Chapel is. But it's interesting who she draws inspiration from, including like The Giver, which like pulls directly from like the Dixie Chicks, who were, you know, originally a band that really like played into and celebrated and appreciated almost like redneck culture, but with a healthy dose, a healthy dose of pro-democracy and anti-war messaging. So it's interesting, like I said, who she draws her inspiration from. It kind of nods more to her political beliefs, but again, really what is so groundbreaking and like revolutionary and boundary pushing about Chapel is her queerness and speaking about it in a way that is both celebratory and devastating, and all the multitudes of what lesbianism is. I think we've really come a long way in this regard with the 90s, and like I think we can now, I hope, appreciate pop music for what it is, and that even though yes, it is like something that has mass appeal, it is a really great representation of the American female perspective, which is finally, or for now, I should say, something that is no longer to be dismissed. But there's more than just pop music, right? Like this is a pervasive pattern, the parallels between the 90s and early 2000s and today. There's like so many, it's actually kind of freaky to compare. And in a lot of ways, you can see how kind of like the building blocks of today's society were kind of placed back then. Going back to 90s rap, of course, we had like Tupac, who through his raw storytelling also provided a lot of political and societal commentary, very akin to a Kendrick Lamar. And then we had the Notorious B.I.G., who he was more like the rags to riches, like success story, American dream, like with his narratives of like survival and grit all the way to like opulence. And then, of course, I would be remiss not to mention the 90s divas, who were really like the first female rappers to go mainstream, like Lil' Kim and Foxy Brown. And then today, like I said, you have like the Kendrick Lamars, the J. Coles, who are very political and like they rap a lot of like societal critiques via really sharp, pointed, layered lyricism. And now the women are really like dominating the rap game, and they took the mic with the same sexual agency and lyrical swagger that their male counterparts have flaunted for decades. Like, and it's so funny how when WAP came out in 2020, I mean, that was red meat for MAGA and like the far right conservatives and the like, you know, anti-progress movement. They latched on to WAP so hard, and I'll never forget Ben Shapiro saying to his audience that a wet ass pussy sounded like a medical condition. It's like, aren't you married? Someone check in on his wife. But anyway, it's interesting to see, you know, the direct descendants, so to speak, in the rap game as well. And I do want to name the female rappers because I just kind of said female rappers. So Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion, Doja Cat, Glorilla, Doechii, and Nicki Minaj, even though she's lost her mind, they have all really like led the charge. They will be talked about, you know, if we have history books in the future, they will be in them. They're really doing something special, and I don't think we talk about it enough. I think we talk about it with some of them, especially like Doechii has like widespread appeal and critical acclaim. So I feel like she gets her flowers often, but all of these women are absolutely murdering the rap game to the point where like I can't even identify the male rappers' voices anymore because I just don't listen to them. Latin music is experiencing something similar with Bad Bunny, with his gender fluid fashion, embracing his LGBTQ fans, and even kissing a dude on stage. He like openly defies the traditional masculinity that is very prevalent within Latin music. And then people like Carol G have done what I'm giving credit for the female rappers to as well, embracing unapologetic female sexuality and merging different genres, really like pushing like the actual musical boundaries as well. So I just think like all of these genres get so like downplayed or like I don't know. For some reason, we have such an appreciation in America for rock music and rock adjacent music, but anything with like a produced beat behind it, for some reason, just gets shit on. But, and of course, I'm talking about by a specific group of people. And I do mean like the political pundits and the news media and the people who are supposed to be our thought leaders. That's kind of who I'm talking about. But at the end of the day, for the last 30 plus years, these musicians have been leading the resistance. And if you're like, I mean, it's just music. It's not. Like, there's so many ways in which this like music has been politicized, from the like PMRC hearings that led to parental advisory labels and like a whole crusade against gangster rap, the FCC crackdowns after the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake Super Bowl wardrobe malfunction, and conservative pundits calling artists like Britney and Christina, quote, moral hazards. Like this is political. It has always been political, but I'm glad that we're getting to a place where like these people who are, you know, really leading kind of the counterculture and providing a soundtrack to the end of the world. I'm glad that we are acknowledging their contributions, both artistically and otherwise. And we still do this bullshit today. Like, don't get it twisted. The reaction to Sabrina Carpenter's album cover for Man's Best Friend is an excellent example, because people took it so literally and failed to like see the art behind it and the message behind it and the meaning and the provocation. They completely took it wrong. And the craziest thing about it is we haven't even heard the fucking music yet, except for one track that's called Man Child and is clearly about hating men. So how can you compare her? Like I'm talking to people that I've seen on social media that I've had to just scroll past, because if I get in an argument with them, it'll just ruin my day. But how can you compare her to somebody like Sydney Sweeney, who really is a product of the male gaze? I went to Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet stop in Dallas last October, and let me tell you, the only males I saw were the other kind of male gaze. Gay dudes. In fact, I went with some 50-year-old gay men. It was the time of my life. But yeah, leaving that concert, it was just a sea of girls. Just a sea of girls dressed in sparkles, wearing butterfly clips and go-go boots. Now, something that sucks about the 90s being back in the early 2000s is, well, a couple things. But first, the body image cycle that we're in. Back then, it was heroin chic and cigarette diets and tabloid fat shaming. And whether you were somebody who gained a little weight and went on vacation, like Jessica Simpson, or somebody who clearly was experiencing some kind of disorder, like Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen or Nicole Richie, you were a paparazzi magnet. Somebody's body looks a little bit different today. Let's put it on the front page of Us Weekly. And now shit's the same exactly the same. The introduction of Ozempic had the weirdest reaction. Full disclosure, I've taken GLP-1s for a couple years now, and I haven't lost that much weight. It's taken me like 2 years to lose 50 pounds, and I'm super active. It's just like, if you need it, like I did, I have some issues that I had to address. And it's the people who are like getting it to lose a little bit of weight for their weddings that are like dropping 30 pounds overnight because they just didn't need their metabolism sped up. So yeah, anyway, off my soapbox. But anyway, like our reaction to it was, that's cheating, which I think that says a lot about how we look at people's weight. Is it's a representation of work ethic and a representation of like willpower. And I think that's fucking weird and backwards and so straight out of the heroin chic 90s. Like, what do you care how somebody loses weight? What a weird land. Why do you care if they lose weight? Why do you care why do you care how much? Why do you care? Why do you care? It's bananas. But I will say that there is a symptom of this that is like, we're losing plus size representation and body positive representation because all the people who used to provide that for us have lost weight. And I'm not saying that that's an obligation that they have to provide that for us, but a lot of people did gain a following and, you know, kind of make their careers on being seen one way, only to jump at the first, you know, opportunity to get skinny. And then what I hate the most are the people who are losing huge amounts of weight right now, and then they're making a point to be like, and I didn't take Ozempic. I didn't take Ozempic. That's not helpful. And then the second thing that's a real bummer about the 90s being back is like recession core and like Y2K panic and millennial doom and like the apocalyptic themes are back. And we used to like kind of laugh, right? We used to like laugh about the whole Y2K thing and how panicked we were and whatever. And now we're in this like post-pandemic AI driven, you know, economically precarious position right now as a society. And like, now I guess the positive under like the, you know, the silver lining here is that the Y2K aesthetics are back. And now I've kind of gotten in a circle here that has like, you know, spawned some really great artists that really tap into the Y2K end of the world core. I think like back then, or like at the end of it, at the tail end of it, it was like Kesha coming up and like 303 and that kind of like indie sleaze was kind of like the tail end of it. And then now, you know, brat core is so back and it's awesome. So, you know, I just want to thank all the girlies and the rappers and the Latin artists who are, you know, keeping us sane during this time. Because yeah, the economy is shaky, politics are scarier than ever, and some days it feels like we're living in like a prequel to the end of the world. It almost feels like it's like Dark Knight Rising. But if the 90s and 2000s have taught us anything, it's that music and culture don't just survive in these times, it thrives. And that's a great sign for us right now, because even if, you know, the United States doesn't make it, at least our culture will. Bye.